Georgette. Grier-Key is the executive director of the Eastville Historical Society.
All right, a lot of tough acts to follow. So I just want to acknowledge the fact that, again, this was a long process. And for me, I think the biggest thing is that a lot of times we work through the trauma, and that's like something that we've normalized in society. And the biggest part of what we have been able to talk about, and I think it's in my little cube here, sea, land, and water. But what does this have to do with Eastville, which is a historical society, and we have founded specifically for preservation? And I'd like to acknowledge, of course, that I have my board president, Robin Brown, here, and also Deacon Brown is also a trustee here, so just a shout out to my board members. But for us at Eastville, it is about preservation. Preservation in the built environment and being here. And so that has a lot to do with the built environment and how we exist. It's nice for us to have images. But to me, life imitates art, art imitates life. But in the fact that it is someone's real life, something that really happened. And for African Americans, a lot of times it is not complete, it is incomplete, it is non-existent, and it doesn't matter to a lot of people, or we have normalized it. This weekend, I don't know if you caught the documentary that was on, and it talked about the Civil War and plantations and how, as a society, we have normalized these things. We have weddings on plantations, but if it's other places of trauma, we don't visit those places and normalize them. So from a place where there was slavery, that is not acknowledged. So we go from a place of that pain and we just keep moving forward. We have one of the first plantations in the Northeast here in Suffolk County. And we don't talk about that, as well as all of the other things that we have already talked about tonight. So it's important for us to talk about that in the history, and not just have images of it, and thinking about the land. So for us at Eastville, we are a place that talks about our community, that represents not only just the formerly enslaved Africans, but also the free persons of color that lived there, that migrated there from places like Sylvester Manor, that also came from the Great Migration from places like Virginia, from North Carolina, and from South Carolina, but also our indigenous population, both Shinnecock and Montauk, who are here and represented tonight, also European ancestry. So we have people that are European immigrants that settled in Eastville, that work together, that worship together, and that were interred together in our cemetery, which we are still stewards over. And so in talking about these nucleuses of families that were created together, that's what we contributed to this project. I too have appreciated Tomashi's inept ability to do research. I talked to her almost 2 years about this project. I felt that she had integrity in her process to really hear us, at least hear me, and to see the connections between my collaborators here tonight. It was really amazing. And although I've known many of the people on stage and worked with them for years, I guess we just never sat down and had a conversation. To see some of these things be pulled out in this way. And I feel that it was a great collaboration, and for us to really make the connections, especially the land use. Like they said, we cannot build more land. We cannot make more land. But there is one thing that is for sure. It is disappearing, and we are not included in that discussion on a level of government, on a level of stewarding and marshaling that land, and we have to be included. And just because you have an ordinance to protect your land doesn't mean anything. And me, as a person who has been advocating for historic preservation of the Sands community, It's been very hard. Me, who have worked in the Eastville Community Historical Society to preserve the Eastville section, it has been hard, and it doesn't always protect it, even if it's protected. So we have work to do. Here we have the stone of David Hempstead. He is a second generation, just out of slavery, and if you see the St. David AME Zion Church on Eastville Avenue, it is his father who was on Sylvester Manor, but it is him who made a way and was the unofficial mayor of the Eastville section of Sag Harbor. His house is still standing. We have one of our now leading elders in our community, E.T. Williams, who lives in his historic house. And he is the one who raised the money for our church along with other elders in the community. And I show this stone because he is a testament to surviving and being free as a Black man in the Northeast, just making it out of slavery. And so his importance to our community is very important. Not only him, his sister, and their daughters, his sister and his nieces, are very important to our community, and they are included in some of the images that Tomashi has used. But they're important to us because when we talk about matriarchs in our community, they didn't get married, which was not of the day. They accumulated land, which was not of the day, because women can own the land. So when we talk about women leading our community, it was very important. There's stories about them in the paper which are very funny, and I use when students come to visit us, where they were accused of hurting a man with broomsticks, and of course they replied in the paper and saying, "We did nothing of the same, and we assure you that anything we hit him with, we dispossessed him of himself." So I talk to the students and I tell them that this is a funny story because you had to be married, and if you weren't married, you know, it was not the thing to do. And they said broomsticks because he accused them of being a witch. So you use these funny stories to talk to students and really bring them into the historical society so they don't feel that it's something so old and history is something that they have to learn. So that's just a funny story that I talk about the Green Sisters. This is an image that is in the picture that is on the wall, and I use this image because we do not, unfortunately, know the name of these two young girls. But we look at this one and we say, they look very mischievous. But they were residents of the Eastville community. And this album is from our collective identity album, and this was found in, we have two albums. One was found in Ivy Cottage, which is for sale right now, and it's listed as a contributing house, and I just hope that the right person buys it. But the other one was 11 Eastville Avenue, and this one came out of 11 Eastville Avenue. And it's important because in these albums, we know that our community was a community that was multi-ethnic, and in each of these albums, it was all three populations that was in each of these albums, and it's important for us to talk about that. This is one of the pictures that came out of the album. And you would see in this picture, in this layer, you see the image that I just showed you. So I don't know if you see that image in this layer. So I just wanted to show you that layer. And then lastly, when we talk about the families in Eastville, I wanted to talk to you about the Johnson family. The Johnson family, we have two sets of Johnsons from Sag Harbor, but then also Johnsons from Bridgehampton. These are the Johnson family members that owned the 1925 Sears and Roebuck Catalog Order House that we are currently headquartered in. In the middle is, the man is Lipman Johnson, and to my right and your left is Rose Johnson, and that is his wife. This image is one of the images that is in the National Museum in Washington, and this is the exhibition that this is in is called The Power of Place. Because for most of the people who understand that African Americans wanted to have access to respite, And that was not something that was normal. So when you see the Green Book and things like that, this was one of the images that was most important. And they came and they took this image, and if you look in the back area of them, that is the Sands community that we have been fighting to preserve. We have national and we have state recognition, but we do not have local recognition, and that is where the protection is on the local ordinance. So that is what we're still fighting for. But this image is very important. And this little story about Rose, when she passed away, they said that the community loved her so much that her bed of roses that they laid at her cemetery was so high, because that's how much they loved her. And she had a wonderful garden. And this is the image. If you look closely in the image, this is one of the images that you would see in this painting here that Tomashi did. So when we talk about, I'm sorry, I see you still looking. I'll let you get one more look. I don't know if they're going into the galleries, but that is the wonderful painting. And the beautiful thing about these paintings is that they're layered with not just my story or Eastville's story, it's all of our stories and communities layered throughout. So you see that. And lastly, I just wanted to pull this map up to show you over time how the community has developed of the Eastville section of Sag Harbor. And if people ask me, well, what is Eastville? Where is it? It's just east of the village of Sag Harbor. And if you come, I will give you a more in-depth tour, of course, because there's no way I can go over this in a few minutes. But to show you the population over time is really important, how it developed. And just to point out the fact that we too were just like many of the other communities. We live multi-generational, we live very close-knit, and many of the things that you heard there was very important, including taking care of the land, taking care of one another. And like I said, all three populations, African American, Native American, European immigrant, they built the church together, they worked together, and they are interred in our cemetery together. And when the men went away, it wasn't for 3 months, it could be for years. The women took care of the community, and that was very important, including Parrish Concert's family, who we are still trying to serve his home at 51 Pond Lane in Southampton. So with that, I'll close and give it back over to Kara.